What's better than fantasy football? Kyle Fridland, Jake Fridland.
Ain't nothing better than football.
Two brothers talking about the nitty and gritty of the best sport in the world. Welcome to the Fantasy Simpletons Show! Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Kyle Fridland of the Fantasy Simpletons. We've got some starts and sits this week for Thanksgiving weekend. This is one of the last weeks before the playoffs start. If you're trying to fight for a spot to get into the playoffs, this is where we help out. We can start right off with the quarterbacks here. My star of the week at quarterback is actually going to be Lamar Jackson, which feels like a no-brainer. It makes sense. Look, he's coming off two of the worst overall games he's had in years. I can't even remember a time where he had two underperforming games this bad back to back. But he's going up against Cincinnati. And we all know how bad Cincinnati has been. Cincinnati is just one of the worst overall defenses in the NFL. Every time these two teams come together, it is magic. The amount of points that are scored, especially if Joe Burrow does play, which we'll get to that. But he is a perfect start for this week. Even if you're concerned about what he's done in previous weeks, this is still like the best game you should play him for. I can't imagine you're really playing him over anybody else on your roster because it's like, well, you gotta play Lamar against the Bengals. But he's not one of the only quarterbacks we have. We have multiple different quarterbacks that should be started this week. And some are very interesting. Some are sort of risky, but let's see. How about Bo Nix going up against the Commanders? Look, I get it. It's Bo Nix. He is an incredibly frustrating player. You don't know what you're going to get out of him. And there are a lot of people that don't trust him as an overall quarterback when you watch him on tape, when you watch him in these games. But you know what? In certain games, especially against bad defenses, he puts up points. He just does. Maybe it's not always predictable. Maybe it's not always consistent. But he can certainly get it done this week against the Commanders, especially in a week where they're not always like a lot of like obvious choices. Bo Nix, he's risky, especially going into this final week here. If you don't know if you want to put all your eggs in the Bo Nix basket, but if you don't got a choice, I'd say there are worse risks to take this week in fantasy. Jacoby Bissett. Although, maybe you should consider Jacoby Brissett. He's still out there in some waiver wires. He's been a big pickup the last couple of weeks. He has been dynamite. He has just been so good over these last number of weeks when it comes to just how much they throw the ball. You know, if he's throwing the ball 40 to 50 times a game, of course, he's going to have great numbers. This offense is going to produce. All of the receiving options are going to eat. And going up against Tampa Bay, which is not been a very good defense against the pass this year. It's another easier matchup. We don't know how maybe it's a little bit more competitive with Baker Mayfield possibly being sidelined. Even with all the case, Jacoby Brissett, you should absolutely play him if you don't have better options. Unless you got guys like Stafford or Drake May or Josh Allen or guys that are like well-trusted guys at this point. Jacoby Brissett should be absolutely considered for any starting lineup this week. How about Trevor Lawrence, though? Look, Trevor Lawrence is another guy that is still on a lot of waiver wires, very much a streamable option. But, you know, Trevor Lawrence has been better than how he looks in games or how the Jaguars look in games. You look back at some of his like fantasy performances, and the numbers that he actually has are much better than what people actually remember or think about. He's QB, I believe QB 13 right now. This is going off of ESPN formatting, but he's in the above average tier. Most of his games fall into like pretty solid games, especially the last like 4 to 6 weeks. So yeah, going up against Tennessee, if you're that desperate and that much of a need, yeah, maybe you should consider playing him. But I would also understand if you're hesitant. I think last we have Justin Herbert, who's all the way on the end here. It's a little bit concerning without Joe Alt, how the offense is set up. That Jaguars game especially can be pretty concerning. But the hope is that was so odd. That was such a blowout that hopefully it feels more like an outlier rather than a consistent trend. He's still got all these weapons. He's still got Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen and Oronde Gadsden, obviously. Like, he's got all these guys. And he's going up against the Raiders. The Raiders are possibly one of the worst teams in football right now. People can play against the Raiders. Their defense is not bad. It's not terrible, but it's not helping them by any means. So I would still consider playing Justin Herbert, especially since he's been relying more on himself to try to get rushing yards in his games. And if he continues that trend, then it's going to be pretty good moving forward. How about some sit options, though? Who are some sits that I have personally for quarterbacks? My sit of the week absolutely has to be Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, it's not, and this is not necessarily against him or the Colts, even though he hasn't been performing as strongly the last few weeks. It's just the matchup. It's the Texans. Texans are the best passing defense in the NFL. There is not a single QB this season that has had a top 12 performance against the Houston Texans. They just don't allow QBs to have good games. They find a way. They have good game plans. They shut them out. They got the talent. They got the defensive line. So this is not as much on the talent of Daniel Jones. It's just more, he's probably not going to have a good game because of the overwhelming amount of data that shows us that the Texans just dominate QBs. They just dominate defensively. Same it goes for like Bryce Young or Jared Goff. Again, these are matchups here. The Rams are one of the toughest defenses in the league. I don't think a lot of people were in positions to start Bryce Young, but especially this week, do not start Bryce Young by all means. It's just the Rams is just they're too good of a team. The game script is not going to be great. Maybe it becomes a blowout enough to where they start to get some garbage time near the end. But if you're looking at like a Superflex league or a 2 QB league, I would highly go against. I would try to resist playing Bryce Young as much as I could for this week. Jared Goff, he's another quarterback that I would sit. He's up and down. He's either really good or really bad. It's week to week to week. This week, no. It's Green Bay. Green Bay, the last time they faced, Green Bay is just a lot better when they play up against the Lions. The Lions tend to struggle against Green Bay. They did so in the first week of the year, and I know a lot has changed since then, but if there was a week where Jared Goff is going to have a bad game, this is probably going to be that week. It's always balanced in between. There are probably some other quarterback questions here. How about if Joe Burrow plays or if Jackson Dart plays? Well, in the situation that if Joe Burrow plays, yes, you should start him. The Ravens and Bengals historically, especially last year, they were just putting up amazing offensive performances from both sides of the football. They bring out the best in each other, both Lamar and Joe Burrow. So if Burrow is back, and hopefully if he's healthy, hopefully they didn't just throw him out there to, try to see if they can salvage their season, which is probably already dead. But no, I would absolutely play Joe Burrow. That seems like the best possible thing for them moving forward. For Jackson Dart, on the other hand, I would absolutely play Justin Dart. Justin Dart? Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart runs a lot. And no matter how he does offensively in the passing game, his run game is usually enough to where it sustains him. Now, could that change a little bit coming back after his concussion? Yeah, maybe. I don't know if it's going to necessarily make him run less. It might help him protect himself more, which is better for everybody. But he's a very exciting rookie QB, and I want to see more. I want to see him on the field. Even in a tough Patriots defense, I still think Jackson Dart is a very playable QB for this week. Now we're moving on from the QBs. Let's go on to the running backs. Excuse me. How about Bucky Irving? Bucky Irving is... Now, he's been injured since week 4. However, Bucky Irving is by all means projected to come back officially this week and to play when he faces the Cardinals. And if Baker Mayfield is hurt pretty bad, if he is going to be more a few weeks, or if it could be long term, they're going to rely on this run game. They're going to rely on Bucky Irving to try to get them moving a bit, to try to get the ball back into his hands of this electric playmaker. I think he's absolutely a guy you should start no matter what. Even if he's not 100%, I think they're going to lean on him enough to where he's going to have a really good game against this Cardinals team. Now, if he doesn't play, Sean Tucker, absolutely, make sure you have him on your roster as well. He could be very much a must-start as well. The other sides, it's a bit more like kind of predictable in some aspects, like Derrick Henry is going to be facing the Bengals, the worst run defense in the league. So, of course, he's going to probably have a really good game. This should be a vintage Derrick Henry game. You should play him. Jaylen Warren, now he's a bit more risky. He's kind of lower end. He's always been sort of RB2, maybe like lower end towards maybe flex at times. But this week, Jaylen Warren is facing the Buffalo Bills. It's a great matchup for him. The Steelers usually find a way to keep games mostly competitive, whether it's Mason Rudolph or Aaron Rodgers. I think Jaylen Warren is a good start for this week. How about TreVeyon Henderson? Another great matchup for another week in a row. TreVeyon Henderson, he's going to be facing up against the Giants. And this last week was the thing we were hoping for. With Ramondre Stevenson back in the lineup, most of the carries, most of the touches went to TreVeyon Henderson. Finally, they figured it out. That he should be the guy that they should be focusing on more. The big play ability, the potential, it's all there. And now he's going to be getting the opportunity to go with it. He should be a must-start in this game. And you should pretty much consider starting him, I'd say, moving forward, just because you never know if he's going to win you your week. Bryce Hall. Ooh, Bryce Hall. Sometimes he's really good. Sometimes he's not. It's been that way with the Jets. Although I can see a chance for some more offensive consistency now that Tyrod Taylor has taken over as the starter. I think this could be a very solid, interesting matchup for Bryce Hall. Against Atlanta. Atlanta has shown they're not very good against the run. The Jets are still super run heavy because they just don't have the passing game for it. So he's going to get all the opportunities. If anybody's going to make the most of those opportunities this week, trust Bryce Hall over other fancy options. Let's move on to the must-sits, though. And this might be a bit controversial. Maybe you're not in a position to sit him. Maybe you need him at running back. Or maybe you picked him up later in the season after you already had some running backs. Rico Dowdle is not in a good place this week. He didn't have a very good game against the Niners previously. And honestly, if you looked at him the last few weeks, outside the passing game, which he's done some good work in, run game, he's been completely shut down. He's getting like less and less rushing yards every single week. And this week going up against Seattle, we're one of the best run defenses. I think he's going to struggle in that aspect again. I think there's a good chance the team could fall behind, and it will cause them to completely miss out on the run. They're going to abandon the run, and they're going to go all pass. There's a chance, though, with pass catching ability, he could be startable if you're, again, you might not be able to sit him. You might not be in that position. But there's every chance that Rico Dowdle might not have a great game this week. It's just the matchup. It's the game plan. It's the way the Panthers have been looking. I'm just not sure on it. David Montgomery, same way as with Green Bay. He just, the more and more that Jahmyr Gibbs is standing out like this when he is playing, it's not going to make things any better for David Montgomery, who already had sort of like a smaller role, but a more consistent role. You would always see him in goal line work and get touches and try to get touchdowns. But you can see there's a slight shift in Jahmyr Gibbs is starting to get more work. They're starting to get him more involved. And it's going to try to phase out David Montgomery just a little bit. Not too much. He's still going to have his touches. He's still going to have his moments. But you always had a consistent role with him. And I'm just not sure how much more they're going to focus on him if Gibbs is doing this well and he's performing this good. So we're just going to have to see. They're trying to get into the playoffs, so they're going to try to play the hot hand. Tyrone Tracy is, well, he's Tyrone Tracy. Personally, I just don't think this offense is really set up for him to be that great. The last couple games, he's done pretty well, but I wouldn't bet for him. I think there are other better options to look out for. Obviously, if you don't have anybody else, he is their starting running back. You could try to go for it. He's been having a couple decent, pretty solid weeks, but that was also with Jameis Winston playing in the game, and maybe that changed things up. Now with Jackson Dart, he's going to be probably a bit more of a focus in that run game, and I just don't know if it's going to work the same for Tyrone Tracy this week. We've got the wide receivers. Who are we going to talk about for wide receivers? How about A.J. Brown? A.J. Brown's pretty good, isn't he? When he's actually targeted, when he's given the opportunities, he can play. He can still play pretty well, can't he? I don't know. It's one of those things where I was always on the fence of, I never didn't believe in A.J. Brown, the talent. I just didn't believe that the team wanted to feature him as much, that he was just outside the game plan, and it was just causing all this drama. Well, now, the last couple of weeks, he's been in double-digit targets last couple of weeks, and he's been putting up great performances. If this starts becoming more consistent, where they rely on him a little bit more, then he's going to be a top 20 wide receiver by the end of the year. He could be a top 15 wide receiver by the end of the year. Maybe he could go up further. It depends. But for me, he's my star of the week at this week going up against the Bears. Some of the other receivers we have here, though, are Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson, you should play him. If you picked him up off the waiver wire, he's been so great these last couple of weeks. The way the offense is set up is just set up to give him as many chances to be great as you possibly can. And I feel bad for Marvin Harrison because this was probably supposed to be his role. If Marvin Harrison was getting what Michael Wilson is currently getting, everybody would be like, oh my gosh, this is it. It's the breakout. We finally got our guy. We finally did it. But no, it's falling more into, it's Michael Wilson right now. It's Michael Wilson. It's Greg Dortch. And Trey McBride's been going off. It's just, in this offense, the way they're playing against these matchups, it would be hard not to start Wilson this week just to see what you got. Some of the other names that we have here, they're sort of the bigger names that you would expect off of good matchups that they're just going to be focused on. Ladd McConkey, not a perfect matchup and not a perfect offense right now, but he's solidified himself as the top guy in that offense. After so many weeks where it's like, who's it going to be this week? Is it going to be Keenan? Is it going to be Quentin? Is it going to be Ladd? Is it going to be Aronde? No. It's set itself up in the last month. It's obvious that Ladd McConkey is still the go-to guy. Once the team has been set up for it, it works out. It makes sense to keep on focusing on him, to feature him. Absolutely. Great star of the week there. How about Nico Collins as well, though? Nico Collins is pretty good. Some would say Nico Collins is pretty good. I still think he's a great startable player this week going up against the Colts. CJ Stroud could be coming back. No matter who's in at quarterback, I think there's still going to be this need, this want to get Nico Collins more involved in these games. So I think absolutely whoever has him should play him every week. He should be considered a wide receiver 1. I think he's going to continue to be good. I think there's a chance that he could be maybe top 10, like right at the end of the season. Maybe he sneaks into the top 10 because I'm just waiting. I still think there's more that he can give. I still think there's more that he can do this season. And Stefon Diggs, what a story for him. I think everybody predicted kind of like a somewhat of a downfall this season. Everything was just lined up for it. And then, bam, he started to really connect with this quarterback. It seems like he's in the right place at the right time, fulfilling the role that he needs to fulfill as the veteran on this younger team that needs to step up, that needs this talent to step up. And it's happened. And they've got such a great record now, and Stefon Diggs just looks really good at the moment. He's not always the most consistent option. There are always some weeks with duds because of how this offense is set up with all the different options that they have. Sometimes the game plan can focus more on certain guys, but in good matchups, I'd be pressed not to start him right now. He's doing a lot better than people actually realize. He's been pretty good this season, so I'd keep playing him. Must sits at wide receiver. Man, it's got to be Ricky. Oh, Ricky. What did you do, man? What happened? Coming off of his injury, the last 2 games he's played, he's been under 10 yards in both games. 1 reception in the first game, 2 receptions in the second game, and now he's going up against Cleveland, which is another matchup that's just not that favorable for him. I don't know, man. I don't know what to do with Ricky Pearsall right now. I thought he would come in after the injury and he would still be able to play at a certain high level, at like maybe a top 25 wide receiver. I still thought there was that potential, but man, he's really not playing much of a part in the offense at all. Maybe it will be better as the season goes along when he gets some easier matchups and you get to see more out of him. But for right now, against Cleveland, look for better options. Rashid Shaheed, though, we were right. Me and Jake, when we were talking about it, we're big Seahawks fans, so we were talking about Rashid Shaheed and the trade, and everybody seemed to gush about it. They loved it. People in fantasy really liked it too. And I just sort of looked around and I thought, I don't think it's going to work out the same way in fantasy. Now, he's a great player, and he's going to have a great role in this offense, especially as we go further into the season and into the postseason. But it's not going to work in fantasy for the way people think. He's going to be featured a few times in the game. He's going to get his chances, but he's not going to get a consistent workload. He's not really even going to be seen as the wide receiver too. He's just going to kind of fall into this mesh of him and Cooper Kupp and AJ Barner and Arroyo and, Torrey Horton when he comes back from IR. The way I see it is this offense, it moves around one man. It's Jackson Smith and Jigba, and everybody else kind of falls into this big glob, this big tier of just other guys. The other guys that keep the offense running. And that's great. And he has a role to fill. And it's great for the team. It's just not going to be great for fantasy. So I would recommend not really playing Shaheed almost at any point this season. Alec Pierce is another guy who I've been really high on. I really like this season. I think he's super underrated. Last week, had a bad game. Had a really bad game. But it was almost kind of expected. He was going up against a really good defense against wide receivers. They shut those guys down pretty early. Michael Pittman managed to have a decent game, but it just didn't work out for Pierce this week. And unfortunately, it's another week where it's probably not going to work out. Why? Houston. That's kind of it. I just don't really see him as a startable option this week, going up against such good defense. But as the upcoming weeks go on, especially if you have him in the postseason of your fantasy playoffs here, I think there are going to be some matchups where you really should consider him as a possible flex option. Let's finish this off here, though, with tight ends. We have Mark Andrews as the star of the week at tight end. Why? Because, and say it with me, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. They're also particularly terrible against tight ends specifically. They're okay against wide receivers, but against tight ends, they're the worst team in the league by a mile. And I wanted to test out this theory because last week Hunter Henry was one of my main starts that week, and he went off. It was his best game of the season, so I expect Andrews to have a similar type of production for this week. Some of the other options include Dalton Schultz, very consistent, another very underrated player that not a lot of people think about. He's rostered now, but a lot of people are probably a little skeptical after last week where he got, one catch. But that was also kind of expected. Some people were in a position where they had to start him, but they were going up against the Bills. They were one of the top teams against tight ends, so it was expected they were going to probably shut him down. This week against the Colts, it's going to be a much better week. They're probably still going to look towards him for consistent production. I think it's going to be a much easier week to play Dalton Schultz. Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson. I've been up and down on him this whole season. I really liked him at the start of the year. Then it looked like the offense changed and they weren't passing as much, and I kind of gave up on him, as did a lot of other people. But then the offense found like a happy medium. It sort of started to change near the end of the Spencer Rattler run and into the Tyler Shuck run. But as I was watching it, as I was keeping up, it's like, man, this works. No, this really works. And he's been consistent week to week. And Juwan Johnson against Miami, good matchup, good solid player, top 10 wide receiver, still available in a lot of leagues. I would play him. Theo Johnson is someone I would play. I expect Jackson Dart to come back this week. I expect him to come back for Monday Night Football. Oh. I expect him to come back for Monday Night Football. It just seems like it would work for him, and especially since it seems like they're building a connection between Jackson Dart and Theo Johnson especially well. And Brock Bowers is just Brock Bowers. Not really any need for any sort of deeper meaning there. It's Brock Bowers. I know he hasn't been performing to the level that people thought he could perform up to, but he's still good enough to where you should start him on most weeks, given the scenarios. And let's finish this off with tight ends here. Oh, AJ Barner. I'm just putting him in sit because I can't predict him. I don't know when he's going to have a good week or a bad week. Some weeks he does great, but the lows are too low personally for me to invest in him no matter really what the matchup is. Coleston Loveland, who has had a good string of favorable matchups the last couple of weeks, and he's been getting steadily better and better and better, and I really like that. This week, he's going to face the Eagles, and it's a very tough matchup. So I just don't think it's going to work out the same way this week. I would look towards better options if you have them. And TJ Hockenson. PSA, guys. Stop starting TJ Hockenson. Stop doing it. Why are we still doing this? As far as like ESPN statistics go, over 40% of people started him this last week. Unless those are teams that are like 1-win teams, 2-win teams that have already given up on the year, I don't understand why people keep starting him. He hasn't been good this season at all. He's outside of the top 20 of tight ends just overall. He hasn't really been injured. He's just been non-performing. And it doesn't really matter who's at quarterback. Even Carson Wentz, he was still kind of maybe mid-ish okay with Carson Wentz, but even then, I would argue he wasn't that good. So I don't know why people keep playing him. I don't know why people, is it just name value with him? I don't know. My personal advice, avoid TJ Hockenson like the freaking plague. If you can. Like the plague. Just do it. Don't even, no. No. Are there any other options I would consider at tight end? Honestly, kind of risky. Tight end's a little weird where it's a lot of the top 5, 6, 7, 8 tight ends in the league. They're all going to be kind of guys you start most weeks anyways. So it makes it a little harder to find like other options out there. But no, this is kind of what I would go with. And that's going to do it for this week on the Start Sit video. Thank you so much to everyone that has been watching. You can watch us on Instagram, on X, on TikTok. You can actually follow us, where we post a lot of content there. We post multiple videos that are podcast style every week. You can also follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. In a complex fantasy world, just remember to stay simple. God bless everyone.